The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to today's webinar entitled Ready for Sudden Cardiac Arrest, AED and Training Programs. My name is Billy Zadig, Manager of Special Programs for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage under our Continuous Learning tab later today. Professional Continuing Education certificates are being offered for today's program. Those who indicated they wanted a certificate at registration and meet the requirements will receive certificates later this afternoon. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenters. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Garland Collier, who will introduce our speakers. Garland, take it away.
Thank you. So good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. My name is Garland Collier and my co-moderator is Michael Kerr. We would like to thank you for joining the APA Cintas webinar, Be Ready for Sudden Cardiac Arrest. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please include them in the chat. I have the pleasure of introducing our presenter, Susan Dexter Shields. Susan has been with Cintas for over 16 years and has held a variety of positions within the organization. Susan started her career as the management trainee in global accounts and strategic markets. Susan then became a sales professional in our fire protection and first aid and safety divisions. She was a regional sales manager in both our first aid and safety division as well as our uniform and facility services division. And now Susan is currently our AED and training national account specialist, where she helps customers in both the public sector and private sector develop large-scale AED and training programs. Please welcome my friend and colleague, Susan Dexter Shields.
Thank you so much, Garland. I appreciate that warm introduction. Welcome everyone to the webinar today. I'm very excited to get to speak to each of you on AEDs in higher education, what a really successful program looks like between cardiac arrest and AEDs on campus. So I will go ahead and get started and go through our agenda for today. So we're going to talk about cardiac arrest versus heart attack, some AED statistics, AED overview, implementing and updating an AED program based on where you are currently in your process, the CPR AED training that is involved, different types of tracking methods, AED technology and program examples, and then we will have time for Q&A as well. So there should be a chat function available to each of you, so feel free to put those questions in the chat, and we will pause a couple times throughout the training today to answer those questions and help everyone out as best we can. So a question that we get asked a lot and that we speak about internally is, what is more important to an organization than the health and safety of their people? So that'll be a lot of our central messaging today. When we talk about AEDs, there are a lot of education to go around cardiac arrest and heart attack. And so we'll talk about some of that today. And obviously we're not on camera due to the capabilities, but this is normally where we talk about the clap and how you clap to show the difference between cardiac arrest and heart attack. And so when we talk about heart attack, that's more of a plumbing issue where the heart is not beating properly and there's some blockage in there. Cardiac arrest is where there's actual fibrillation going on and it's shaking or quivering. And so a defibrillator is what's going to knock that heart rhythm back into place so it's beating properly. So that's the layman's version of how that works in terms of cardiac arrest versus heart attack, in terms of electrical problem versus circulation problem. So anytime that someone goes down, we want to make sure we're calling 911, locating the AED, and then beginning CPR immediately. We have a lot of AED statistics that we can share with you today. Cintas has been in the AED business for 24 years. Obviously, that's where I work, and so some of the messaging today will be some Cintas-related data, as well as for the industry. There's been 850 lives saved with the Cintas AED since 2007. The chance of survival and timing is extremely important in AED programs. I'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. But for every minute that a person is down, it's 10% off their chance of survival. So that 3-minute rule in terms of placement is extremely important. And again, I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But average EMS response time is 8 to 12 minutes in the US. So again, extremely important in terms of placement of those AEDs. Another way that we can increase chance of survival is when effective CPR is performed. So when you get that proper depth of compression to 2 to 2.4 inches, that chance of survival can go up anywhere between 10 and 40% is what those studies say. Over 1,000 people per day suffer from cardiac arrest outside of a hospital setting. Again, another reason why AEDs are required so many places and why it's important messaging. We also certify over 350,000 individuals in first aid CPR AED training every year with 200 certified instructors. So this is where we get into a little bit more of the detail. So AEDs have a lot of different ways that you can structure a program, but all AEDs should include something along the lines of what you're seeing on the screen here. So we need more than just an AED to save a life. We got to have everything from planning through implementation and then ongoing support. So a lot of the companies and businesses and universities that I work with, especially in higher ed, are in the planning phase. We help determine the type, location, and number of AEDs needed for campus. We help through the ordering and planning and implementation, making sure the installation is where it needs to go, abiding by all ADA standards, and then the ongoing support. So pad and battery replacement, software upgrades, and the online portal as well. So here are 3 of the AEDs pictured that I get asked for quite a bit in higher ed. These are 3 very common units that have been around for a while, all have a little bit different levels of technology. So the first one there at the top is the ZOLL Plus. This unit came out back in 2003, and it was the first unit that had CPR feedback. So as I mentioned earlier, that depth of compression when you're giving CPR is extremely important. And so throughout all the studies that American Heart Association has done, they've determined that the proper depth of compression is 2 to 2.4 inches. And so this ZOLL Plus unit there at the top was the first unit to actually measure that depth of compression. When you attach the pads to the body, it's going to have a puck in the center, and that puck is actually measuring the depth of compression. And so it's giving you feedback that says good compression or push harder. And so that is obviously increasing the chance of survival quite a bit when you're giving high quality CPR. The fact of the matter is we may only need to use the actual AED and shock about 50% of the time, but you're going to use CPR 100% of the time whenever you are adhering to someone that's either gone down because of cardiac arrest or heart attack. Because heart attack can lead to cardiac arrest, we let that AED tell us what to do. They're all trained and specifically designed to be for the layperson. You don't have to have a PhD to be able to use any of these units. The second unit listed there is the Reviver View or the Lifeline View. This unit came out back in 2010, and it was the first unit that had a video screen. So again, something we had been asked for at the field level and by a lot of our customers that said, hey, the audio only version is great. But again, studies have shown that when you have both audio and visual cues, the response rate and the speed to shock and the ease of use is even higher. And so that's another very common unit we get asked for in higher ed. The unit here at the bottom is the ZOLL 3. This unit came out just a couple years ago, back in March of 2020. And so I like to say if the ZOLL Plus is mom and the Reviver View is dad, and this is their beautiful baby. It combines the best of both worlds in terms of the CPR feedback and the video screen. Again, 2 of the pieces of technology that I get asked for the most. And so this unit has a couple other additional features. It has a combo pad. So with all the other units that are out there, you have to have separate pads for adult and child. This unit's actually going to have a combo pad. And then to be able to change the joules from adult to child, you just click that little button there at the bottom, and that'll change it from adult mode to child mode. It also has a smart lithium battery and ability to connect to Wi-Fi. So, not every site needs that, not every customer needs that, but a couple of our customers do in terms of that remote monitoring. It may sound a little silly, but we do have places that are tough to get to, whether that's an airplane, a national forest, a bank vault. There's a lot of places that AEDs go that aren't always accessible. So sometimes that Wi-Fi is required. When we're talking about implementing an AED program, there's a lot of things that these facilities managers and facilities directors should consider. We want to make sure we're looking at places where people tend to be close together in terms of placement. So here we're thinking of where are the biggest areas that people are congregating, right? Is that a graduation? Is that a basketball game or a football game? In the dorms where they're eating, right? In the cafes. So that's a common thing to consider there. The 3-minute response time is a guideline. So basically that means 3 minutes from drop to shock. So if you're with the victim, you need to find an AED, get there within 90 seconds and then 90 seconds back. At that point, with the 10% off the chance of survival for every minute, right now we're down to 70%. We haven't even turned the thing on yet. So that's why the placement is so important on campus. Identifying obstacles to AEDs. This is a question I get a lot as well. There's not like a hard and fast rule on what that 3 minutes looks like, right? So we take a lot of things into consideration in terms of locked doors, badged entries, self-locking doors, how many floors, how many square footage. If I have a stopwatch at a basketball game, let's say, that arena would be completely different with a packed stadium versus an empty stadium, right? And so we take all those things into consideration when we're looking at placement. We want to make sure the AED is visible and accessible. That's why the V signs come with it, so you can see it around the corner. You want to make sure your AED is inspected on a regular basis. And so this is, again, one of the requirements that comes through, whether that's from your state regulations. The manufacturer is going to recommend that they're inspected on a monthly basis as well. There's a lot of different guidelines that go into that based on the industry. And then updating your emergency response plan and training your staff. CPR AED training is something that, again, goes hand in hand with that. The layperson will be able to use the AED. And OSHA is going to require you have some people that are trained on site, right? The states are going to have different requirements, and I'll touch on that here in a second, but the majority of them are going to say, hey, you got to be trained on the AED that you have, and you need to be trained on CPR and AED because they go hand in hand. So I do have a link here to the AHA guidelines for that, and you guys will all get access to this PowerPoint as well. And so this goes into a little bit more detail in terms of where we should place the AEDs. And again, this is straight from American Heart Association, who is the governing body of AEDs in the United States. Visible and accessible, we want to deliver the shock within that first 3 to 5 minutes. The 3-minute response time is the guideline to help determine how many AEDs you need. A lot of times on campus, we'll find central areas. So let's say it's a 5-floor building and there's a bank of elevators in the center, then it's going to make sense to put the AED there on each floor, because from a thought concept, a mind concept, you're going to remember that the AED is there by the elevators. And so if that's the same on each floor, then obviously that helps work quicker when we're ever trying to get to those AEDs. Cafeterias, main reception areas. When we talk about badged entries, right, or it's a one-way door, those things are all taken into consideration. Arenas, high traffic areas, concerts, graduations, all things that can be taken into consideration. There's a funny story about how the 3-minute rule actually came to be. And so they tested the response time in a lot of different areas, but they found that testing AED response time in a casino was actually going to be one of the best ways to determine placement. So when AHA did that study, what better way to test that than a place that's packed, right? And it's loud, it can be chaotic. How fast can I get to that AED and back? And so when they tested that 3-minute rule is really where they came up with that guideline and making sure placement was accurate in terms of speed to shock and being able to save that person. I am going to pause here. I know I have given a lot of information just in the first 10, 15 minutes or so. So Billy, do you have any questions that have come through in the chat so far?
We do not have questions that have come through so far.
All right, give me a chance to at least take a drink of water, so I'm good with that. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can throw a test one in there just to make sure that it's working. But we'll answer those throughout the presentation today. I also get questions a lot on, hey, when do I replace an AED? When is the right time? What does that look like? I'm taking a program over, or, I was in a support role and now I'm managing the program. This falls under me in facilities and operations management. What's the best practice here? And so the answer is it varies. It's going to depend on, the make, model, and serial number of that unit. And that's going to give us a lot of really good information It'll give us the manufacture date. From there, I can extract the warranty expiration, see if there's been any recalls on the units, if there's been any discontinuation, if different models have had issues, how long they're good for. And really that's where we get the game plan going on, how many AEDs need to be replaced, which ones are in good shape, and how we want to phase that update. So if AEDs are discontinued, that's when we would need to replace an AED, whether that's the first generation and they're doing a second version. Cardiac Science has a G3, for example, and they have since come out with a G5. That's been a lot of advancements in terms of technology, and so that G3 has been discontinued. Now they're still going to support the pads and batteries for normally about 10 years or so after a discontinuation is announced, but that's normally something we take into consideration in the game plan in terms of, hey, we need to put this in the budget for next year, or we need to start planning ahead for this. If it's out of warranty, that's another time where we normally replace and update an AED. When the warranty expires, any repairs or service on the AED becomes the responsibility of that institution. And so that can be very expensive as well. And so normally we weigh the pros and cons in terms of, all right, should we replace the pads and batteries, or should we go ahead and trade in the unit and get that unit updated? And then finally, reaching its expected end of useful life. So most, like I said, pads and batteries are supported for 10 years after discontinuation. Warranty is about 5 to 8 years, depending on your unit. The manufacturer is going to recommend you replace after that 8 to 10 year time frame. Again, just because of technology advancements, software updates, just like cell phones and TVs, AEDs get better and more efficient as time goes on, right? As technology gets better. So we want to make sure that we are keeping an eye on that and knowing the status of our current AED program. So with the Cintas program, for example, there's lots of different options in terms of what you want to do at that time. I'm also going to talk for a little bit about training and compliance in terms of first aid, CPR, and AED training. When it comes to IRED, we do have a mixed bag of how our customers are doing that right now, whether that is online training, on-site training, a mix of both, more of a hybrid. Some universities are attached to a health system and they're able to get some of their CPR training done that way. Other ones have on-site police departments, and so they're doing some, train the trainer courses there. Other times it's a mixed bag, and we really have customers that say, hey, I can do a majority of my training, in-house, but I really need you guys to come in and be my backup, right? And there's other institutions, whether they're big or small, that just say, hey, I don't have the people for this, right? I don't have the personnel to be able to remove from that project to spend 4 hours in a first aid CPR AED training class. So that's a lot of times where we come in, because they are our own Cintas employees, they're not outsourced. We're asked to come in and do that training. And so in a first aid CPR and AED course, you're going to learn a lot of different things. You're going to learn how to identify someone in distress and identify, hey, what's going on here, right? Is it, are they having an allergic reaction? Did they faint? Are they having a seizure? Are they allergic to something? Do I need to give the Heimlich maneuver? Is it heart attack? Is it cardiac arrest? Is it a stroke? What's going on? So those are all things that you'll learn in that first aid portion of that class. Just how to recognize someone in distress and what to do next between now and when EMS does arrive. When it comes to the CPR portion of the training, that's when you actually get down on your hands and knees and do the compressions and see how much physical effort it really does take to give that hands-only CPR, and then how to use the unit to deliver the shock, whether it's a semi-auto unit or a fully automatic unit. On the semi-auto, that's where you will push the shock button. On the auto, there is no shock button to push. It'll automatically shock if needed. And none of the AEDs will shock unless an abnormal rhythm is detected. And so that's the good news. You can't actually hurt anybody, right? You're going to be given CPR, and then the AED is only going to deliver the shock if it does need it. This is one of their most requested courses because so many people find benefit in this type of training, outside of school or outside of business or outside of their job. A lot of people that take the class are parents or coaches or do something else in their community where that training is really, really beneficial. So that'll fall back into the CFR regulation there from OSHA. Now they're going to require at least one person per shift, right? But you can't do CPR on yourself. And so Classes up to 9 are the most common for the full first aid CPR and AED training through American Heart Association. But you could do more classes and you have additional instructors. You know, if you already have people that are trained on CPR, AED, and they just want a refresher on this unit, there's a lot of different training types available. As I said earlier, there's a really nice blended approach to CPR and AED training, whether that's online or in person or a mix of that. Sometimes you have people that can't make the in-person class. I will always say the in-person class is more beneficial because it's more hands-on. You're hearing real stories. You're getting a little bit more of that physical practice. It's just more engaging. But you can take the class online and do the skills check portion in person. We partner with Damar Hamlin and his foundation, and then the Save the Day training in Cincinnati. Not only did that happen, you know, at the Bengal Stadium, it's a great customer of ours, and we've really been able to spread the word there in terms of CPR training and getting people certified. We do call it the Damar effect, right? There's a lot of awareness around AEDs now. Ever since, you know, Damar Hamlin went down on Friday Night Football, Bronny James, there's been plenty of other athletes that, you know, have had cardiac arrest on national television. And the crazy thing is that it's happened for a long time, but really the awareness and the media around it is just a lot bigger than it had been previously. A lot of times it would just be the local communities that knew about it. You know, it could be the 17-year-old on the high school hockey team, you know, or someone else in the local community that had happened to. It wasn't always broadcast at this level. So obviously it's bringing a lot of awareness to AEDs and proper placement and having a good program where the AEDs are maintained on a regular basis. Earlier I spoke about state requirements, and obviously you have to get your eyeglasses or zoom in a little bit for each of the individual requirements here, state by state, but this is just a general overview. There's really 3 main requirements in that most states are going to say, hey, when you have AEDs on site, you got to do this. They want you to have medical direction. They want you to register the AEDs with local EMS and have CPR AED training. And so that's obviously included in our program, but there's different regulations based on if it's certain states have regulations on an athletic facility or a gym, or if so many people congregate here, if you have so many patrons that are here for an event. There's different regulations state by state, so it's my job to memorize all that fun stuff and make sure that that information is disseminated. There's a county in Florida that requires AEDs based on if your building is big enough, if you have so many employees, or if you have if you're open to the public for certain hours. So we're happy to answer any of those questions, obviously, but a lot of that information can be found online and through your Cintas contact. So I am going to ask for a little bit of participation here. You know, every university is different in terms of cardiac arrest and their AED placement. You know, I have one university that hasn't used an AED in 2 years, and I have another university that has a save almost every football game. So it really varies based on not only the size of the school, but on a lot of different factors that really aren't predictable. We can't predict the future, right? But that's why AEDs are there, just in case of that emergency. You know, I always make the joke, if we could predict the future, then I'd be playing the lotto right now, right? So we can't do that. So we want to make sure that we are in a good place to make sure that we can respond to an emergency in good time. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of interaction now. You guys should have some type of reaction available to you, if you can find that on your screen. And there's different ways to track your AED system. So I want to see, just as a show of hands, from a participation standpoint, if you're doing something there on the left. If you use an Excel doc to track your AEDs, give me a thumbs up, do the like button. If you have a handwritten version somewhere that's floating around your office, you can give the love or the heart button. And then if you have some type of online portal, give me a clap for that one. So I know we have a lot of answers from the question you guys did ahead of time. So get a little bit of those reactions. All right, we got a mixed bag here. So a lot of different versions there, but this is what I see a lot when I'm brought into an account to say, hey, I need some help with the program, right? This is what was handed down to me And so I'm kind of doing some cleanup efforts, or I need to do a site survey and a walkthrough and see how many we have. So I normally ask the question at this point, you know, how did you receive this data from your predecessor? And how would you like to pass it down? So again, a lot of different ways this can be tracked, but that's normally the first step in identifying where you are in your AED program, is just getting a look at where we're currently at. You know, how many units do we currently have? Where are they located? Get me the make, model, serial number. We'll run through and see, you know, what that program looks like and put a plan in place to get you guys up to speed, in compliance, and taken care of. I'll take one more pause here. Billy, do we have anything else that's come up in the chat yet?
We have two questions. And the first question is, does Cintas recycle or remanufacture old AEDs when new ones are purchased?
Yes, that is a great question. We do have a trade-in program. We understand that there's been some type of investment, right, into that unit to begin with. And so when it reaches that end of life or it's time to trade in or upgrade, we do trade in those units and offer a dollar amount based on that make, model, and age of the unit and condition. If the unit is not of trade-in value, then we would recycle the unit, yes.
Okay. And our second question is, do you have or know the regulations in Canada, particularly for British Columbia?
Ooh, yes, we do. If that person wants to put their information in the chat, then we're happy to send you that data after the call today.
Great. I will make sure you have the contact information. That's all the questions we have for now.
Perfect. All right. We are doing good, doing good. So here's where we talk about program management. So again, lots of different ways to track the AEDs and see where they're at on your campus. But we've really found over the years of being in the business this long that having an online portal where the customer can log in and see the status of their program is extremely important. We want to make sure our customers have access to view their locations, run current reporting, see what the state laws are in their area, and then do the post-event support as well. So these are just a couple screenshots of what an example of a management portal would look like. You'll see the status bars here across the top of the screen. And so at the beginning of each month, all your inspections would be in yellow. And as they're inspected throughout the month, those would turn to green. So for example, in some systems, there might be a QR code that you scan if you're doing it yourself. We have a system where we scan the barcodes, and that's going to mark the inspection as complete in our system, which then flows through to this portal. And so that's going to indicate that the inspection has been completed and that the AED is in good working order. The next one here is equipment. And so that would be pads and batteries. So if the pads and batteries are, in good working order, the expiration date is already going to be loaded. Once they get 60 days out from needing to be replaced and hitting that X date, they'll turn to yellow. So that way we have an idea of when those need to be replaced and make sure they're replaced early, so there's no lapse there. The next circle here is for training. And so we're able to load all the training records as well. AHA certification is good for 2 years. And so whether that's separated by department on your campus or by location, or there's a lot of different campuses throughout some systems, but you have the availability to house your training records in here, in addition to your internal LMS system with HR. As I said before, we do have some need for remote monitoring with certain customers and campuses when it can't be maintained physically, and that's an option as well. So in any of these portals that you'll see similar to this, there you can see your locations, you can see your reports, you can see the documents, AED laws. This is where all of your information is housed for EMS registration, your prescription, medical direction, all that good stuff. So when you click through, you'll be able to see each of your locations and the status. The program management is going to include everything you need from a regulatory compliance standpoint. So that means the prescription, medical direction, physician oversight, again, one of the requirements based on your state. This program management, the tracking reporting, inspection, EMS notification, to access the state laws and regulations, and then the training videos. The other thing I want to talk about is reporting an event. And this can be one of the nerve-wracking portions of owning an AED program on any campus, no matter what size you are, or any government entity. So when you have a cardiac event on site, 911 is always the first call, but Cintas is normally the second, because not only do we need to get those pads replaced and possibly the battery, we need to help fill out that post-event support documentation. So what you'll do is you'll click that report an event button there at the top, and we walk you through how to do that. But it basically is a brief questionnaire that says, hey, what time did the person go down? What time was CPR started? What time was 911 called? And then we collect that data along with the EKG data off of the unit and send that off to the physician that's overseeing the account. They'll write up all the post-event support documentation and then send that back to you as the main contact in your campus. That way you can, have that for your internal protocols, whether your insurance needs that, your safety team, your risk management team, whoever needs that, that documentation will be there for you. Because we understand it can be a very scary time. We understand that, there's a lot of unknowns in those scenarios, and obviously we're your partner, so we want to be able to walk you through that and make sure you have all of the information that you need. This will also show you the training records, so you can see who was trained from each of your sites, the first name, last name, training agency, and then the expiration date of that certification. The app is mobile friendly as well, so if you want to do some spot checks yourself while you're out and about on campus, you can see the screenshots here of being able to view that in a mobile friendly version. Next, I'm going to get into some of the AEDs a little more specifically. These might be AEDs that you have on your campus or one that you've seen, at another school, in a public place, at your gym, at your grocery store, at a football game you've been to. AEDs are all over the place, and so I'm just going to go over some of the more common units that we see. This one is the Revive Review or the Lifeline View. This is made by DefibTech. This is one of the more basic models, as it does not have a video screen or the CPR feedback, but it's a great unit. It's been around for a long time, gives the text, lights, and voice guidelines, and it has the data card in there as well. It's a built-in metronome to make sure that you are doing the compressions on the proper beat. I have a local community college that went with this unit, so a very cost-effective unit that's out there. Next, we have the Revive Review or the Lifeline View. They've been under both names in the past, but again, as I said earlier, a very common unit because of the video screen and the compactability. This unit has an IP rating of 55, which means it's really good in heat and cold, very rugged and durable, as a lot of the units are, but this one has been rated well for that one. We have a public university in Illinois that utilizes this unit on more of the service maintenance plan, where they needed the inspections done by a third party. It was something that their risk team had determined needed to be done by a third party just from a verification standpoint, to say, hey, we need this outsourced. We didn't have the manpower to do that. We needed to be able to have a third party to hold accountable and prove that the inspections were completed from a database standpoint. Visual Plus, I have showed you guys earlier as well. This was the first one that had that CPR feedback. This one, you got plenty of examples of who goes with each unit, and there's different pieces of technology that are more important to each of the decision makers. I have a school in the Big Ten that went with this one. They had some mobile units as well that were really important to them. That gets asked a lot when it comes to athletics in the K-12 space, but also in higher ed, because of all of the requirements around stadiums and athletic events. And so placement is really key, as we talked about. You're going to have one in the basketball arena. Obviously, you're going to have one in the football stadium, but where it can get a little more questions around that area is with basketball, baseball, softball, some of the more mobile areas. And so if you have a press box, you can put the AED in there. A lot of times what we do is we have them with the athletic trainers. That's a really good way to be smart about where your AEDs are, make sure you're covered for all games, all practices, intramurals, and then away games. I get asked well, hey, I trust my school. Do I trust the rest of the conference? I want to make sure I'm protecting my students and my student athletes. And so the way that some of the best programs do it is having a lot of the AEDs in permanent places, right? In those arenas and press boxes, but also when it comes to the practices, having those AEDs with the athletic trainers. So there'll be, 10, 15 of them that are with the trainers in the trainer's office, and they'll check them out and take them with them as they are at the, the practice, the intramural, or the away game. And that's been a really good solution. So I wanted to make sure I shared that with the team today in terms of making sure we had proper coverage at each of those events based on the guidelines. That's what we did at this Big Ten university, where it made sense to have a lot of them placed, whether that's in an outdoor cabinet or in the press box or concession stand, but also having the mobile units available with the athletic training staff. The next one is the Zoll 3 unit. This was really important to one of my universities in the SEC. They had on-site daycare, right? They have kids that attend a lot of different events on campus, not just games. And so it was really important to them to have a unit that had the integrated pads. So to have the child-adult combo pad was really important to them. And so that part of the service, with the replacement of the pads and batteries was important at this university. They did not need, the Wi-Fi functionality. That's not required, obviously, but it's an option. But when you have that many units across campus, it can be difficult to maintain them. And so for that one, for example, those were two of their big points, that they wanted to make sure they had that combo pad with the accelerating joules as needed, and then placement throughout the different buildings on campus. Next one here is the G5. This is a cardiac science unit. Cardiac science is owned by Zoll. That acquisition went through quite a few years ago, but I do get asked for this unit quite a bit. It's really common in a lot of police forces and squad cars. And so if you have a campus that the police department helps run your AED program, you may have seen this unit. As I said previously, there's a G3 AED, and then this is the updated version of that. It does have the CPR feedback. It does not have the video screen. But one of the reasons that we get a lot more requests for this unit is because it has the ability to switch between English and Spanish with just a couple button clicks instead of, a call to IT and a reprogram. So that's really common in certain parts of the US where they want to be able to switch between English and Spanish. I have ACC school that, again, that's what was important to them. So every campus is different, but being able to have that CPR feedback and the daily self checks was really important. Pre and post trip inspection on squad cars was a big importance to them, and so that's why they went with this unit. A lot of different units that we've discussed so far. So now I'm going to go into program options. So we talked about the units. That's the actual unit. That's one of the biggest decisions. The next decision you're going to make is, hey, what kind of program do I want? Do I want a direct purchase and I have the staff to do it myself? Do I want a direct purchase and then have someone maintain it for me? Or do I want more of a service agreement program? So I'll go into the details between each of these. But for the most part, for a long time, direct purchase was your only option, right? Direct purchase and then doing it yourself, doing those checks. In that scenario, it's going to be more of a capital expense, right? I got to have this budgeted. I got to have some funding set aside for this. It's going to be a CapEx expense there. So you're going to purchase the AED unit, the cabinet, the V-sign. You'll purchase the medical direction and prescription. Because AEDs are class 3 medical devices, you have to have these things, right? The FDA says that these things have to be part of the program. You're going to perform the monthly checks yourself, log them yourself. Again, whether that's in Excel or a handwritten sheet, an internal work order system, or some type of online platform. Again, that's more of a capital expense option. That was back when AEDs were normally, pushed in and they were really big and they were harder to use. But as technology gets better, and just like cell phones and TVs, they get easier to use, there's more options that have become available as well. So direct purchase and maintenance agreement is another option you'll see out there where, hey, I have some in the budget. I can purchase the unit, the cabinet, the V-sign for signage, and then I need someone to help me out, right? Medical direction and monthly checks. For us, this would not include the pad and battery replacement, but this is more of a mix there, a medium between, hey, I have some that's a capital expense and some that's an operating expense. A lot of the procurement teams I work with, whether that's through Omnia or TIPS or one of the state contracts, that's an attractive option as well, right? To say like, hey, I didn't have all of this budgeted, I had some of it budgeted. I need to have a third-party verification for my checks. And so that's when it comes down to, I'm going to purchase this part, and then I'm going to have a flat monthly rate for all the inspections. And then you got the service agreement. So this really came about for us, at least, when there was a lot of regulations that went through requiring AEDs in certain places, in schools and healthcare facilities, in gyms and public places. And so this is more of a lease or rent model. It's a consistent monthly rate where there's no upfront investment, and then everything's included from an asset-based item, and then the checks as well. Includes free replacement of the pads and batteries for the life of the unit. So this is classified more as an operating expense. So again, we encourage all of our facility operators and facility managers to have those discussions with procurement, because they're going to have that knowledge base, right, on what they prefer. Like, do you want a flat monthly rate across the board? Do we want, the budget to hit here and there? We also have a lot of contacts that get risk management involved, or Office of Emergency Preparedness. One of my universities has that program. They manage that program through the Office of Emergency Preparedness. They manage it, and then the invoicing goes to each of the schools individually, or the departments individually. But there's a lot of different ways to manage the program. So here are just 3 of the most common that are the most common in higher ed and in my experience. Next, I'm going to talk about procurement. So I mentioned that a second ago, but there's different buying motives in terms of what's going to make the most sense when you're going through, a successful and best practices for your AED program. Vendor consolidation, who do we already do business with? It's going to make it easier from us from a contact standpoint. Utilizing cooperative purchasing and state contracts. That helps with the, going through the bid process and saying, hey, we already have an MSA with this company. I can use them. It makes that relationship easier. Strategic business partnerships, existing customer relationships. A lot of the time, this is a morale boosting purchase, right? It's something that is going to keep our people safe. It's really important. We have a big responsibility in higher ed to say, hey, not only are we protecting our employees and our students, but our parents count on us to protect our students while they're on our campus. I've had plenty of stories about move-in week, right? Where we have people that are doing some physical exertion they may haven't done in a while. We have to be considerate of a lot of different people that are on our campus. Logical business decisions are normally related to this, risk mitigation, and like I said, managing the safety of our students, faculty, staff, guests, and then community members. All things to consider when you're developing your program, when you're taking over a program, or you're in it for a while and you say, I would really want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So having the discussions around capital expense versus operating expense, human capital, whether you call that turnover, attrition, churn, movement in staffing, there were things that we had available to us pre-COVID, and we might be wearing a few more hats now, right? We might not have the personnel that we had previous to that, whether that was, 08, 09 or COVID or what time frame that was. But we do get requests for that again, because it is efficient from a financial standpoint to outsource certain things. Risk mitigation, we want to minimize the risk as much as possible through those verified certifications and checks. And another question to ask when you're having these discussions internally is, what can the agency outsource versus do in-house, right? Like, there's only so many things I can, purchase outright versus rent or lease versus do in-house versus outsource. So just common things that we want to encourage everyone to consider when they're talking about their AED program, no matter what stage you're in. That was a lot of information today that I went over with you. I do have my information on the screen here. If anybody wants to reach out directly with some follow-up questions. I know we covered a lot of data today, from what a good program looks like to the actual units available and what those service options can look like. So I'm going to open it up one more time for Q&A if anything has come through. I know we have over 100 people in the meeting today as part of this continuing education and training. So I want to thank everyone for joining us and giving you the chance to learn a little bit more, and for us to get to know you guys and provide some great information.
Okay, we have a couple.
Do we have any other questions in the chat?
Yep, we have some questions that came through. First question is, are nursing instructors exempt from training?
So nurses that will normally go through what's called BLS training. And so that's basic life. It's a different type of training. American Heart Association still offers that. So they still have a certification that they have to go through. So they're not exempt technically. It's just a different type of training.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is, how often should an AED be inspected?
Another good question. So the manufacturer is normally who we default to there to answer that question. And most of the time they're going to say that's a monthly inspection. And so that's going to be every 30 days or so. That's how our service is set up. There are certain campuses that need certain ones that are checked more often, like the police force example. So they do a pre and post and trip inspection with their units on a daily basis because they have a daily self-check. But most of the time they're going to fall under that monthly inspection at a frequency standpoint.
Okay, well, that's all the questions we have for now. So I'm going to give everybody 15 minutes of their day back to ponder. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Susan or the group. And to our panelists today, thank you very much for an informative webinar. And to our attendees, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. So until next time, be safe, have a wonderful holiday weekend, and let's be kind to one another. Thank you so much. Oh, we have one more question that just came through. What is the life expectancy of the units?
Another good question. So warranty is going to be anywhere from 5 to 8 years on the unit, and that's based on the manufacturer. Useful life is normally 8 to 10. So, you know, just like a vehicle, you can have, you can drive a vehicle that's not under warranty. But when it comes to an FDA regulated device, most of the manufacturers are going to recommend that you stick with that warranty timeline, 8 to 10 years at the most.
Okay.
Is the useful life for an AED.
Thank you so much. And that does it for our questions for today. So again, have a wonderful, restful holiday weekend. And until next time, just be kind to one another. Thank you. Bye-bye now.